President, please be seated. The court is now in session. Before we hand the floor over to the co-prosecutors, Mr. Dujpari is now directed to report to the Chamber on the current status of the parties to the proceedings, including the witness. Interpreters note that Grafshay's mic is activated, but it is not heard. We can't hear anything from the Grafshay.
So.
The President, Mr. Dujpari, you may now proceed. Mr. Dujpari, good morning, Mr. President. Good morning, Your Honors. During today's session, the 12th of December 2012, all the parties to the proceedings are present, except Mr. Ieng Sari, who is present but in his holding cell downstairs due to his health concerns. This morning, the Chamber continues hearing the testimony of Mr. Kampan, alias Pan Wan. During the afternoon session, the Chamber will be hearing the testimony of a civil party, TCCP-01, through video link from France, where the civil party resides. From the AV booth officials, the facilities are ready, prepared for such video conference or testimony through remote participation. The President, thank you, Mr. Dujpari. We would like now to hand over to the co-prosecutor to continue putting questions to the witness.
Merci et bonjour, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. President. Honorable members of the bench, good morning to all parties present. Good morning to all those attending in the public gallery. And good morning to you, Mr. Witness. Mr. President, I just have a brief question, or rather a request to put to you with respect to the allocation of time. Yesterday, we were given an entire day to share the cross-examination of this witness with our colleagues from the civil parties, and covering a number of subjects, including administrative and communication structures, policies vis-à-vis the enemies and the acts and conduct of the accused. Yesterday, there was an oral decision that was read out during the afternoon session of yesterday's hearing. I therefore would respectfully request leave to continue our cross-examination up until 11:30 this morning, instead of up until this morning's first adjournment.
Good morning, Your Honors, and good morning to everyone in and around the courtroom. Yesterday we went 10 minutes past 4 o'clock. It took approximately 10 minutes for Your Honor to read the oral decision. Therefore, any time that was lost during the reading out of the order was gained by the prosecution when we went over 4 o'clock. Therefore, there is no basis for them to make this application. If they want to make it on another reason, such as they need additional time because they have been either not allocated a sufficient amount of time or it's taking longer or whatever, they can make that submission. But the argument that they have made right now does not stand to reason because they were given 10 additional minutes after 4 o'clock yesterday. Thank you.
Si je peux répondre.
If I may respond, Mr. President, as I said earlier, there are many subjects to cover. And yes, we unfortunately have fallen behind, but we have yet to cover the period during which the witness worked in Sector 105, and a certain number of questions must be put in order to achieve the ascertainment of the truth, as the witness has already made relevant statements before the co-investigating judges. I would therefore reiterate my request to continue this cross-examination up until 11:30 rather than 11. Thank you.
The President, legal lawyer for the civil parties, you may now proceed. Counsel Pick Ong. Good morning, Mr. President, Your Honors. I fully concur with the request or the application made by my colleague, the co-prosecutor, because the time has already been allocated to the civil parties and the co-prosecutors for putting questions to this witness, and we believe that we, the civil parties, only need 1 hour for that, so time should be granted to the prosecution to finish their questioning. The President, counsel for Mr. Nuntia, you may now proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, everyone. I feel as if I should go on record only because I did speak to my colleague across the stage yesterday, and I indicated to him that we would not object to a short extension of time so long as we, the defense, are given the same leeway. And that has always been our position, and we've gone on record in the past saying that we do not object in principle to such extensions as long as they're reasoned, and as long, most importantly, as long as we are given the same degree of flexibility with respect to our cross-examination. And I say that particularly today because I did mention it to my colleague yesterday. So I just wanted to put that on the record. Thank you.
Mr. President, with regard to the request by the co-prosecutor, the Chamber will consider this practically after the first adjournment of this morning session, and the Chamber will look into the actual questions being put to the witness, whether the certain level of relevance before we consider whether more time is given. And parties to the proceedings are to be advised that during this afternoon session from 12 to 1 p.m. there will be a town hall meeting organized in the public gallery. And then we need some 20 minutes or so for the preparation of the testimony through a video link. For that, we need to observe some breaks, and normally we can't continue the proceeding without observing a brief break because of the technicality of the proceeding concerning the recording of the hearing transcript, for example. And that when it comes to the time allocated to parties, in general, it is our policy that each party will be given equal time, opportunity to put questions to any witness or civil party, unless a party refuses to use all the time given, or time may be lost due to some technical difficulties. But the Chamber is very mindful of these problems. The Chamber would like to now hand over to the prosecutor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. Witness, before resuming our line of questioning regarding exchanges of communication between Sector 105 and the Center, I seek a clarification from you with regards to the various periods during which you worked as a decoder of telegrams, during which you worked for your father. Yesterday, you stated that after you left B20, you began working as a telegram decoder for your father before arriving in Phnom Kuala. You then stated that you worked as a messenger, you worked as a driver, you also worked as a security guard, and you also worked as a decoder of telegrams. This was during the time that you were at Phnom Kuala. When I made reference to the two telegrams that were dated on the 26th of October 1976, your sister, Bopan Van, was probably most likely the one who had decoded the telegram. Can you please tell us about the various periods during which you worked as a telegram decoder, and more specifically, did you work as a telegram decoder before your sister took on her duties, during the same time that she was working as a decoder, or afterwards?
Response. I had worked before my sister came to work at the place. When she came, I then worked as a driver instead.
D'accord. Et
Very well. And yesterday you testified that your sister had worked for your father for a short period of time. She decoded telegrams, and once she completed her work, did you resume her tasks as a telegram decoder in 1976?
Response: no, I didn't, but it happened before the war. After the country was liberated, my sister came to take over from me. Until the day when my father passed away, she had been working with him all along, and I had been working as a driver ever since my sister took over from me. I already stated in my record of interview.
Merci.
Thank you. And despite the fact that you no longer worked once your sister was replaced, yesterday you recognized some of the references and formatting of those telegrams were entirely consistent with the telegrams you decoded during the period in question. You also confirmed the use of certain titles that your father used in addressing certain offices. I wish to show you another telegram. It is E3/1195. This is telegram number 22 sent by Leng to beloved comrade Peng. It is dated the 25th of November 1976, and it is copied to Mr. Nunchia. My rationale for presenting this telegram to this witness is because it contains content relevant to his family. With your leave, Mr. President, I wish to show this very particular telegram to the witness and have it projected on the screen.
President, you may proceed. Court officer is now instructed to obtain the document from the prosecutor and hand it over to the witness for his examination.
Alors, pour permettre de...
Just so that I can ask the witness certain questions, I will read some extracts, and I'm going to read them in English because the French version isn't terribly well translated. It's a little bit ambiguous and it's clearer in English. So I'll read paragraphs 3, 4 and 5 of the telegram. Signed by Leng. 3 says as follows.
I quote, I assigned niece or nephew, Bopan, to attend the course on confidential documents. Please help me with that. Point number 4, I assigned Comrade Khan at the radio station to attend the course on radio documentation. Comrade, please help me to process this request. And 5, my mother went over to visit her nephews and nieces who are my children, such as Van Thi Lan and brother-sister Da. Kindly help me to process this request. She would like to visit Phnom Penh. She is old now. Donc, ma question, monsieur le témoin, est de savoir si, quand ce télégramme signé Lang parle de...
I just want to ask Mr. President if the reference there to the niece or nephew Bopan is in fact a reference to your sister Sovan Hang, who, according to the telegram, was following a course on confidential documents.
Yes, that's correct. It was referred to my sister.
Est-ce qu'il était habituel sous le régime?
Was it normal under the Khmer Rouge for a cadre such as your father to designate his children to things while referring to nephews and nieces?
At the time, parents and children were not allowed to address each other as father and son or daughters or so. They were supposed to address them by nephew or nieces.
Et
just to be absolutely clear, who is Comrade Khan from the radio section referred to here in the document?
Khan was in charge of radio station. He was working with my late father.
Et pouvez-vous
What about Vantilan and brother stroke sister Da? As in paragraph 5 of the telegram, who are they?
One was my younger biological sibling. Da was also my biological sibling, and T was also my biological sibling.
Merci. Donc, d'après la
Thank you very much. So, having heard that telegram read to you, can we say that you confirm its contents? In other words, that your grandmother wanted to visit Phnom Penh at the end of 1976?
Yes, that is correct. When she returned from Phnom Penh, she passed away.
Merci.
Thank you. Mr. President, I'd like to show E3/877 to the witness. It's telegram 54 sent by Chan. That's the name we had on the first telegram that we were talking about yesterday. It also contains Pan's name, but Chan's name, Chan, is there. It dates from 20th of May, and it is to beloved and missed MO870. The English translation is incomplete, but we do have a complete translation in French and, of course, the original in Khmer. So I'd like to show this to the witness, if I could, Mr. President. It concerns Sector 105.
President, you may proceed. Court officer is now instructed to hand over the document to the witness.
Alors,
This document, sent by Chan, concerns the Sector 105 security situation. I'll read a couple of extracts from it. On the 12th of May 1977, on the Dak Dam spearhead, a Yuan was smashed who died on the spot. On the 18th of May 1977, Division 2 arrested 2 Yuan on the Kei Sema and Srei Prea spearheads. They were just contemptible tourists. There is the A in Khmer, meaning the contemptible. One second and one first lieutenant. They asked to go to France. They said it was dreadful. In Vietnam, there were famines and combats. On the 13th of May 1977, the sector unit sacrificed one and had another severely wounded when the enemy attacked near the Do Choi office. On the Dosa side, 50 meters from the office. Our assessment is that this was not an enemy from the outside. We suspect the division. Henchmen of the contemptible Som and contemptible Chin, and again in the Khmer there is the word for contemptible for these two individuals. This problem has already been reported to Comrade San. Despite arrests of Unit 920's, activities continue one after the other, but we are making arrest after arrest too. In 1977, we accompanied specialists in secret codes to the place where they are trained. We have received a report on the emergence of the cooperative PS concerning the problems of the Vietnamese. A decision has already been taken. Witness. Can you explain what this reference is to Division 2 of Sector 105? Is this a group within the army part of the sector or something from Division 920?
I do not quite understand your question. Could you please clarify it?
Il est question.
Yes, in this telegram there's a reference in the French translation to Division 2. Was Division 2 part of the sector army that you talked to us about yesterday, led by Sopir, or was it part of Division 920 in Mondulkiri?
I am not clear, but it could have been in Division 920. And as for the sector, it had its own force attached to the sector, and division forces were a separate one.
Merci. Les questions.
There's a reference here to the arrest of Vietnamese, and in the PS it says that a decision has already been made in that connection. Do you know if decisions about the Vietnamese who were arrested were taken in Sector 105, or were such decisions taken at the centre?
I do not understand your question.
In the telegram, there's a reference to decisions that are taken about Vietnamese who have been arrested in Kieu Sema and Sre Prea, affiliated to Comrade Chu. Now, the decisions about what was going to happen to these people who were arrested, in particular the Vietnamese, were these decisions taken in the sector or in the party centre?
Let me clarify this issue. Of course, there were ongoing war along the borders at that times, and I follow my father all the times over there. And of course, there were arrest of Vietnamese. And as for the decision, it was not up to the sector to decide on the arrest. The decision had to come from the center.
And who took the decision in the center and referred it outwards?
I do not understand this, the working procedure, but I only knew that every action was carried out on the behest of the center.
Merci.
Thank you. A last question about this telegram. There's a reference to Chin, C-H-H-I-N, in the telegram. Is this the same person you were talking to us about yesterday, the Secretary of Division 920? Here there's a reference to the contemptible Chin. Can you enlighten us, please?
Yes, there was.
Il est dit dans
It says that actions have started by soldiers of 920, but arrests are being made one after another. Do you know that if in this period of June 1977, there were a great number of arrests in Unit 920?
I do not recall it well, but many people did disappear at that time.
Thank you. Mr. President, for the purpose of the transcription, I would point out that on file we have the confession of Mr. Meng Meng alias Chin, Secretary of Division 920, who was arrested and sent to S21 in February 1977. This is confession D175/3.41, D175 and IS 5.49. There are also two significant lists of S21 prisoners that I would like to mention. First, document IS-73 dated 11th of June 1977, which is a list of S21 prisoners who had been executed. 80 of them are from Division 920, who had been smashed on the date of the 10th of June 1977. Another list of prisoners from S21 is dated 5th of June 1977. Its code is D175/3.30, and it has a list of 90 individuals who were arrested in Division 920. There's just one more telegram I'd like to show the witness, E3/1204. Dated 27th of August 1977. It is sent by Comrade Chun to respected and beloved M870. It concerns security matters and the publication of the Revolutionary Flag magazines. I'd like to show it to the witness, Mr. President, so that he can have a look at it.
You may proceed. Court officer, please obtain the document from the prosecutor and hand it over to the witness.
Alors, je vais
I'll read the first paragraph. it says the magazines of Party and Revolutionary Flag, which were published from 1975 to 1976, were collected and properly arranged for reading. Witness, how many issues of Revolutionary Flag or Revolutionary Youth did Sector 105 receive from the centre?
I do not recall.
Est-ce que vous
Did you yourself read Revolutionary Flag or Revolutionary Youth?
No, I didn't. At the time, those magazines were placed at the cooperatives.
Donc j'entends.
All right, so if I understand correctly, you're saying that the magazines were distributed to the cooperatives through Sector 105. Am I right in that understanding?
Yes.
Merci.
Thank you. Paragraph 4 of that telegram says, for the enemy situations in Karachi, 2 enemies escaped into Kyose Mat district. These 2 enemies were arrested and sent back to Karachi. I would like to know if at the time you understood this as being a normal procedure to send back to the zone people who had fled from it and who were arrested within Sector 105.
That I did not know.
Le point 5 de ce texte.
And in paragraph 5 it says, three people who escaped from Tung Treng were the real enemies as they were holding Sihanouk pictures. Can you tell us if in those days, if you carried a photo of Sihanouk that proved that you were an enemy?
That I am not sure. I did not know whether or not those who were holding Sihanouk pictures were characterized as enemy. But the situation at that time was very fragile. In other words, when we had slightest suspicion against another person, then that person would be considered enemy.
Merci, Jean.
Mr. President, that brings me to an end for the questions on the telegrams. I'd now like to move on to quote an extract from an interview record with this witness concerning reports that came out of the districts within Sector 105. I'd like to read the piece and ask the questions after. It's E3/58 again. In other words, the first record in Khmer. If I can find it. Well, let me tell you that in French it's on page 3 and page 3 in English as well. And in Khmer it's on page 4. Excuse me, ERN 00239936, and it's also page 3 as well as 4 in Khmer. And it's the second question that is being asked. Here it says most of the time that the work on building dams and canals was reported to 105, as well as school, health, espionage, good and bad elements, traitors, and so forth were reported on. Office K17 often gave instructions and then sent them out to the district. And they prepared a district performance report and sent it to the centre on a daily basis. With respect to a report on the bad elements, in the first and second, the instructions from Office K17 was that the person be re-educated at the base for the first and second offences and be called for re-education at the Phnom Kraul Dam Security Office for the third offence. The security office was managed by the Battalion 2 Chairman Leng. Those who were brought for re-education included those who broke discipline, committed immoral offences, stealing, robbery, and work evasion. In each case, the offender had to prepare a biography. The centre never made any order to the K17 office for any arrest. What I would like to know is, at the time in Sector 105, how was a determination made to see who was a good or a bad element, who was an ally and who was a traitor? What criteria were applied to sift the good from the bad?
During that era, as I stated earlier on, those who did not respect others were considered pacifist enemy, and those who had the background as teacher or officials of the previous regime, those were the target of removal.
Et là encore, est-ce que c'est...
Have these criteria been determined by your father or by the Sector 105 committee, or building on instructions that were sent out from the party centre?
I did not understand the working procedure very clearly, but as far as I understood, the sector did not have any discretion to decide on this or such instruction. It had to come from the center. As for the arrest, as well, the decision had to come from the center. The center would issue an invitation letter for education, and when those people were taken for education, they literally disappeared.
Est-ce que selon les...
According to instructions from the centre, were people transferred from Phnom Kraul Security Centre to Phnom Penh?
Could you please repeat your question?
Yes. By virtue of these instructions that were sent by the centre, were people transferred from the Phnom Kraul Security Centre to Phnom Penh? I'm referring to prisoners.
No, those prisoners detained at Phnom Kraul were not transferred. Because at that time, there were no transfer of prisoners from Phnom Kraul, but of course there were summoned by the center for those who had to undergo education. So the centers would order the arrest of those who were supposed to be re-educated.
Merci. Alors, je vais en venir.
Thank you. I wish to return to the period subsequent to the death of your father. I don't want to focus on the circumstances surrounding the death of your father, given the time remaining, but also because you have highlighted those facts in your written records of witness interview. Yesterday, you stated that Nunchia had summoned cadres, ordering them to take part in re-education training, following which they disappeared. Are you aware of any summons that were sent to your father in Kampun when they arrived in Phnom Penh?
Response: yes, it is correct.
Merci.
Thank you. Following the death of your father, you stated that you began working as a driver at K2. You worked for Ying Terit, following a 2-month period during which you planted vegetables and farmed vegetables. What was the name of the office or location where Ying Terit resided?
Response: after my father died, I still planted the vegetable. Then I was taken to become the driver at K2.
Merci.
Thank you. And as Ying Terit's driver at K2, can you please tell the chamber how often Ying Terit met with the other leaders, such as Pol Pot, Ying Sari, Nunchia, Khieu Samphan, Sun Sen, or others?
Response: I don't recall this.
Si vous ne vous en souvenez pas,
If you do not remember how often she met with all of those leaders, do you have any recollection as to how often she met with Nunchia?
Response: how frequent she would meet him, I don't remember. However, it is for sure that she met him. I don't just remember how many times she would meet him every month.
et à quel endroit
And where did the meeting occur?
Response: I don't remember the place.
Merci. Je voudrais
Thank you. Mr. President, in order to assist the witness in refreshing his memory, I wish to refer to document E3/447. I will not be quoting from the ERNs since the questions and answers are numbered. This is the third written record of witness interview. I would direct you to question 8 and 9. The eighth question is as follows. Based on your knowledge, what was the connection between Mr. Nunchia and Ms. Ying Terit? The witness provides the following answer, and I quote, "Both of them had some kinds of connection because they usually had meetings together twice or 3 times a month. I know this because I was the one who drove Mrs. Ying Terit to meet him." Question 9. Did Ms. Ying Terit go to meet Mr. Nunchia? Did Mr. Nunchia come to meet her at the Ministry of Social Action? Answer. He usually asked her to go and meet him at K3. Question number 10. What was Nunchia in charge of? Or rather, the answer to question number 10, the organizational structure in the regime was bottom up. Some administrative works had to be reported to Mr. Nunchia. Did she meet with him at K3 at the request of Mr. Nunchia? Do you stand by this statement?
Response. As I already stated in the record of interview, although I don't remember this in detail, but I was taking her to K3 where I would be stopped and asked to wait outside. They would meet 2 to 3 times each month.
Savez-vous à qui?
Do you know who Ying Terit was accountable to with respect to the activities of her ministry?
Response. No, I don't know about this. I only know that I took her there and back to her place, and I would be at the outside.
Merci, Monsieur le témoin.
Thank you, witness. When Ms. Ying Terit attended meetings at K3 several times a month, did she often travel alone, or was she accompanied by senior cadres from the ministry?
Response. It depends. Sometimes she was on her own. Sometimes she was joined by a cadre or two.
Lorsque vous conduisez
And when you drove Ms. Ying Terit to K3, did you ever see any other leaders attend those meetings? And if you did not witness the leaders attend the meeting, were you ever told whether other leaders took part in the meetings, aside from Ms. Ying Terit and Mr. Nunchia?
Response. No, I don't know about this, because as a driver, I would only drop the passengers at the place, and I would only be waiting outside to receive her. I never entered the premise, inside the premises.
Est-ce que vous avez vu passer des...
Did you see any cars drive by the premises waiting outside the compound? Did you ever enter into conversation with other drivers and talk about the potential presence of other figures?
Response: No, I never met them.
Vous avez dit très clairement
You stated very clearly that Ms. Yingtiarit met with Mr. Nunchia at least twice or 3 times a month. How did you know that she indeed was meeting with Mr. Nunchia if you yourself did not enter K3?
Response: At that time, I knew for sure that Uncle Nunchia was there.
est-ce que Yingtiarit
Did Yingtiarit or other social affairs cadres confirm that they had indeed met with Nunchia?
Response: No, she didn't say so.
Je passe à un autre sujet.
I will move to the second last subject. You talked about some of the instructions issued by senior leaders, and you had made a few statements before the investigators with regard to the Social Affairs Ministry. And you stated, and once again I will be quoting from E3/447, question number 7. Yingtiarit had the power to nominate staff or to dismiss or purge staff, to organize meetings, and to spy on medical staff in order to uncover the enemy burrowing from within. The use of dismissal and purge were both used here. Do they mean the same thing did they mean the same thing at the time you were working?
Response: I don't understand the actual meaning of the term purge. But as a person responsible at the location, I believe that she had the authority to have anyone removed. But I don't understand or don't know the level of the authority enjoyed by her, although I knew for sure that any order would be rendered from higher up, and Madame Yingtiarit would not be able to challenge any instruction or orders rendered from her superior. So in principle, at that time, it was up to the upper echelon or superior who would render any kind of decision, and that the subordinates would have to follow suit. I don't know for sure what the term upper echelon means.
Et vous avez parlé
In the same interview, you also stated that she had the power to spy on medical staff in order to uncover the infiltrated enemy. Does this mean that staff were being monitored?
Response: The term monitoring here is more about to observe what's going on and trying to understand the policy, the working policy as such.
Merci.
Thank you. In several of your written record of witness interviews, you made reference to the arrest of Sue and Pak from the Ministry of Social Affairs. What were the roles of Sue and Pak within the Ministry of Social Affairs?
Response. He worked as the Deputy Chief of K2, or perhaps the Deputy Chief of the Social Action Office, because there was no official announcement about his or her title at that time.
Vous voulez parler de Sue ou de Pak?
Are you referring to Sue or Pak? Or are you stating that they were both working as deputies for Ms. Ying Terit at the Ministry of Social Affairs? Could you please be specific?
Response. And Sue, I was referring to.
Et la personne...
And what were the duties or roles of the person called Pak?
Response. She was the head of the medicine production unit. It was known as P1 at that time, if I am not mistaken.
Est-ce que vous avez...
Did you ever take Sue or Pak to K7, to the Department of Messengers?
Response. Yes, I did, but I used to bring her to that place only on one occasion. After that, I never saw her again.
En français, nous avons une traduction au singulier.
Are you referring to both individuals? I thought I understood that you only took one of them. Could you please clarify?
Response. Yeah, I took them to K1 only on one occasion. That's only once.
D'accord. Là, j'entends...
Very well. So I understand that you took them to K1, but did you ever take them to K7? Because what I heard through the interpretation was K1. So could you please, Mr. Witness, clarify as to whether you took them to K1 or K7?
Response. I was saying K7 indeed.
Merci.
Thank you. Who ordered you to take Sue and or Pak to K7?
Response. Madame Ying Terit did that.
Et était-il précisé?
And did she make it explicit that those two were being summoned to a meeting?
Response. There was no confirmation to me whether they would be sent to the meeting or not. She only told me to bring them to K7. That's all.
Et ensuite, est-ce que...
And following that, during the days that followed, did Ms. Ying Terit talk about Sue or Pak during her meetings?
Response. After 15 days after that, a meeting was convened in which Ieng Thirut was saying that these people were traitors.
Je voudrais citer votre réponse 14 du
I wish to quote from your answer to question number 14 in document E3/447. Yi Pia said that those two were traitors. She read from a circular issued by K3. Which circular is being referred to, and how did you know this? Was it Ieng Thirut who had said so?
Response. It was Madam Ieng Thirut who said that this was the circular issued from K3.
Quand vous parlez de
And when you refer to K3, were you aware of the relations or communications between K3 and Office 870?
Response. No, I don't know.
Au fin de la transcription, Monsieur
For the record, Mr. President, I wish to point out that under IS 5.95, there is the confession of Sinpun alias Su, dated the 13th of March 1978, which makes reference to the arrest made on the 3rd of March 1978 in the list of prisoners of S21 under E3/1535. Listed under item 25, there is the name Wee Poo, alias Pak. He is registered as having entered S21 in February 1978. Aside from these two senior cadres who were deputies to Ieng Thirut, were there many arrests and disappearances from the Ministry of Social Affairs from 1978 onwards, as of the time that you began working there?
Response. I don't think I remember every detail of this. Several people disappeared, but I don't remember those people.
Et comment faisait-on pour
Prior to the disappearances, like cadres from Sector 105, were they called to meetings, or were there other ways or other procedures in place that were applied prior to their disappearance?
Response. I've indicated these people would be told to go to study sessions, after which they had disappeared, and it happened again and again like that.
Et concernant ces personnes arrêtées,
And of those who were arrested from the Social Affairs Ministry and who were called to these study sessions, who from the Ministry of Social Affairs issued those summons, if you know, sir?
Response. I don't know about this, although I know for sure that people kept disappearing. However, whether who issued such order to have this and that person removed or taken away. I don't know, because I was a driver mainly.
Merci.
Thank you. You talked about the many disappearances from the ministry. The disappearances from factories, from pharmaceutical factories, from K2. Given all of those disappearances, did you note a shortage of qualified cadres because of the great number of disappearances that were happening?
Response. Yes, that's what I noted back then. There were less people at work and we lacked the workers.
Vous avez mentionné
You talked about the work being carried out by the three daughters of Yangtirit and Yangsari. You talked about Min, who was a director of a hospital, Mit, who worked in a pharmaceutical factory, and Ara. Now, aside from the three daughters of Yangsari and Yangtirit, by the end of 1978, were there still a good number of cadres who were working, or would you say that the majority of cadres had been purged?
Response. When I worked with her, these three people, the cadres, still worked with in that place.
Dernière question, monsieur.
And one final question, Mr. Witness. You talked about Case 7, the Department of Messengers. It would appear that in one of your PVs, there is a reference to Case 17. Was the Department of Messengers designated as Case 7 or Case 17?
Response. I myself am confused. Perhaps I have mistaken K7 for K17, because it is K17 for sure. I believe it was located near the riverfront.
Est-ce que l'origine de la confusion ne vient pas du fait que
Does the confusion stem from the fact that within Sector 105 there was also an office called K17?
Response. Yes, I think that's the case.
et qui a dirigé
And who was at the head of the Department of Messengers in Phnom Penh? You talked about Su and Pak.
Response. The person by the name of Gu was the chief of that office. I don't know who could have been his successor. This person also known as Gu or Ki.
Merci pour la
Thank you very much for that clarification. Mr. Witness, I have no further questions for you. I wish to thank you for answering all of my questions. I wish to thank you for your patience. Mr. President, I have no further questions to put to this witness and would now like to defer to my colleagues from the civil parties.
The President, Council Angodam, you may now proceed. Council Angodam. Good morning, Mr. President and Your Honors. Good morning to everyone in and around the courtroom. I have an observation which is really strange observation. The co-prosecutor finished his questioning by way of giving some of his remarks, telling the chamber that all of his questions are somehow useful and of relevance. This is really a kind of strange remark, and it should have not happened. The co-prosecutor was talking a lot about Madam Ieng Thirit, although it is obvious to everyone that the case involving Ieng Thirit has already been severed from the current case before us. When it comes to the administrative structure, perhaps it's relevant. I do not contest this. However, when it comes to the charges against Madam Ieng Thirit, these kind of questions relevant to these charges are somehow irrelevant. The President, Counsel, please be seated. You would not be allowed to make an observation like that at this moment. You may do so when your time comes, if you feel that it is not appropriate when you noted the remark by the prosecutor. You could do that during the time allocated to you. We would like now to proceed to lead co-lawyers for the civil parties.
Good morning, Mr. President. Good morning, Your Honors. And good morning to everyone. We would like to delegate to Counsel Samsukung and Counsel Isabel. President, you may proceed. First and foremost, my respect to President and Your Honors, and good morning to everyone. Good morning, Mr. Panvan. I do not have many questions to put to you, and in the interest of time, I am going to put some succinct questions to you, and I also expect succinct answers from you as well. Yesterday, you responded to a question posed by the prosecution. You told the prosecutor that you and your family took refuge in the jungle. I would like you to enlighten the court further. When you took refuge in the forest, what were the prime motivation of your flee into the forest? Response. At that time, there was resistance movement. I was very young at that time, and my late father was one of the resistance fighter, and the prime motivation was to liberate our country. That's why there was this national movement taking refuge in the jungle in order to resist for the liberation of the country. Question. You say that that was because of the resistance movement. What was the name of this movement? Response. At that time, it was called the National United Front. Question. The National United Front was a national movement, as you put it. Who was the leader of this front? Response. It was led by the then Prince Norodom Sihanouk. Question. When you were taking refuge in the jungle together with your family, how long did you stay in the jungle? Response. It was rather long, but I do not recall the exact period when we stayed over there. I took refuge in the forest when I was very young, and then I stayed there until I actually understood everything around me. So it was back in 1970 or so. I returned. Question. I now come to the time when you came to B20, and you said you were trained how to write documents. When you were at B20, what was your impression of this office, particularly people around you at this office? Response. I did not understand at that time that much. I did not know how people interacted with one another. I was trained how to write the typewriters and learn how to decode messages and telegrams. So upon completion of the training, I returned to my home village where I work as the decoder of telegrams. And then my sister came to take my place, and I turned to be a driver. Question. When you came to B20, did you know the function of this office? What kind of jobs did they do? Response. It was a long time ago. I cannot recall it all. But in 1970, following the coup d'etat, those ANCOLs were from Ratanakiri province. And my father was summoned to study in B20, and I came along with him. And I was trained how to decode telegrams, and I also was tasked to courier messages among leaders. And once I completed my training, I returned to my home village to work with my father to decode telegrams. Question. When you and your father came to B20, how long did you stay there? Response. My father did not stay at B20. I was there alone. Question. When in B20, apart from B20, did you see any other satellite offices within the compound of B20? Response. In B20, there were many branches. As you might have already known the structure, because if we talk in the context of war time, there were different administrative structures and branch offices. For example, the vegetable or the food production offices and other offices as well. And the compound of B20 was very large, and there were some intellectuals who returned from overseas, stayed there as well. And during the wartime following the coup d'etat, the leaders who came all the way from Ratanakiri had to stop over at B20. Question. At B20, you mentioned that there were other branch offices subordinate to B20. When you were staying there, did you observe that there were meetings convened by leaders at B20?
តែខ្ញុំដឹងហើយនឹងចាំហ្នឹងគឺមានវាព្រោះវាអញ្ចឹងឯងបាទព្រោះកន្លែងធំវាតលប្រជុំរហូតព្រោះកន្លែងមន្ទីរបងពេកជាកន្លែងសិក្ខាសាលាចង់និយាយភាសាយើងឥឡូវ
B20 was a place where they convened meeting. It was like a workshop hall where leaders assembled and discuss matters. Question. When you were staying at B20, did you happen to know the policy of the senior leaders? What, for instance, what did they want to achieve at B20? Response. I did not know. I was too young at that time to understand anything, so I simply did my job as I was instructed. Question. You said that you were one of the trainee undertaking the course, a typewriting course. When you were undertaking this course, did they disseminate any information to you? For example, did they incorporate any ideological training or whatever training, political training, for instance, to you at that time? Response. I do not recall it very well in terms of theoretical study. They actually conducted some political trainings, particularly on political lines, so on and so forth, and I do not recall them. At that time, they told us how to overcome our own self as well. There were a lot of different kinds of trainings, and I simply cannot recall them all because it took place a long time ago. So is it fair to say that there were political trainings, for example, on political lines, but you do not recall? Is that correct? Response, yes. Question. When you were staying at B20, did you ever hear the policy to evacuate people out of Phnom Penh city following the victory over Phnom Penh? Response. No, I was not aware of it. Question. Now I come back to your work. Upon completion of your study, you say that you were one of the typewriters for your father, and you were also acting as his messenger, and then later on you handed it over to your elder sister. And why did you hand it over to your sister, and why did you then become a driver? Response. At that time, there was no clear-cut structure and appointment, and there was no such a thing as a professional field of work. It depended on whatever the upper authority instructed us. When I talk about typewriting training, it was not a professional training course. I simply learned how to type it, and I took the course for a short period of time, and then I went back and did the job for a short period of time. But there was no specific assignment that I had to stay with this job. It all depended on the need. So long as the need arose at that time, I had to fulfill it. And at that time, my sister could typewrite it, and I could drive. That's why she came to take my place, and I had to do a different job. That was a driver. Question. So now I would like to ask you about the period after 1975. Yesterday you testified in response to the question by the prosecution that following the 17th of April 1975, you moved to Phnom Penh along with your father sometimes in June 1975, rather in May 1975, and there was a rally at Olympic Stadium. Do you still stand by this statement? Response, yes, I did. I did come along with my father at that time. Question. When you came with your father and other cadres from the sector, how did you come to Phnom Penh from sector 105 all the way to Phnom Penh? Response. At that time we took a truck to Kratie province, and then we got off and we took the boat all the way from Kratie province to Phnom Penh. Question. When you got to Phnom Penh and you attended the meeting, how long did the meeting last? Response. I do not recall how many days it took. I was very young at that time. I simply came with my father because I wanted to see Phnom Penh. I just wanted to indulge myself. Question. If you do not recall the exact numbers of days the meeting was held, how long did you stay in Phnom Penh at that time? I stayed there for approximately half a month, and then after that I went back bringing along with me some materials as well. Question. When you came along with your father to Phnom Penh to attend the meeting, how many cadres from sector 105 accompanied your father? Response. There were many cadres. He did not come alone. He came along with many other cadres. Question. After returning to Sector 105, you worked as a messenger and a typewriter for your father. Did your father tell you the details of the meeting held in Phnom Penh? Response. No, he didn't. President, Council, please pause for a minute because the AV assistant have to replace the recorder, and we shall resume shortly. President, we shall now resume. Council, you may proceed. Question. I would like to clarify a bit on the meeting held in May 1975. Where was the venue of the meeting? Was it held at Olympic Stadium or somewhere else? Response. It was held at the Olympic Stadium. And well, as for the typewriting, I was not the typewriter. I was the decoder of telegrams. I had my father decode telegrams. Question. How did you know that the meeting was held at the Olympic Stadium? Response. Well, at the time, there were cadres from every corner of the country. There were tens of thousands of participants. Question. When the meeting started, did the actual meeting was held inside the compound of the Olympic stadiums, or it was outside the premise of the stadium? Response. No, it was outside the stadium. Now, following the meeting, your father, in his capacity as the secretary of Sector 105, had to return to their respective sector. Did your father convene the sector level meeting in order to disseminate the outcome of the meeting held in Phnom Penh? A response. That I do not know. I do not recall it, but generally the meeting was convened on a regular basis, and it was normal to disseminate information in relation to the meeting held elsewhere. Question. Following the meeting, your fathers and other cadres returned to their respective location. Did you observe that there were any change to the overall work plan of the sector? Response. I do not recall, but at that time the main task was the increase of agricultural production and everyday activities. That was it. Question. You mentioned the cooperatives of Sector 105. Do you recall when that sector cooperative was established? Response. I do not recall in Sector 105, but to my recollection, cooperative was established well before the liberation of Phnom Penh in 1975. Question. There was an existence of cooperative. People act communally at the time. What did people do in the cooperatives other than eating communally? Response: I do not understand your question. You mentioned that there was an existence of cooperatives, and in cooperatives people act communally. And I would like to know whether or not this cooperative was under the supervision of the sector secretary, that is your father, or cooperative was a separate entity independent of the sector. Response: actually, the Sector 105 office had its own cooperative. They had cooperative, and they had their communal eating hall separately, and at the village level they also had their cooperatives. And in cooperatives, other than eating communally, they work collectively. For example, in the rice fields, they had to do it all together, and they harvest crops and kept it collectively. Question: after your father and other cadres returned from the meeting held in Phnom Penh, did you observe any treatment against the Vietnamese, the ethnic Vietnamese people? For example, did they, force people to get married or so in your location? Can you respond? Can you please repeat your question? When your father and other cadres returned from the meeting in Phnom Penh, was there any treatment against the Vietnamese people, for example, forced marriage of the ethnic Vietnamese or people in your location? President: witness needs not answer this question because this is beyond the scope of the current case. Forced marriage is not within the confine of case 002/01. This was enumerated in document E 124/7.1. The inhumane acts did not encompass the forced marriage. It was confined to the population movement phase 1 and 2. Council: thank you, Mr. President. I now move on to the next question. In relation to the security office, you also testified yesterday that in Sector 105, there was one security office under the supervision of your father, and then later there was another. There was a Division 920, which was located to Sector 105. Could you enlighten the court the interaction between Division 920 and Sector 105? How did they interact, and what was the hierarchical structure of these two entities like? Response: there was interaction between these two entities, but I do not understand the detail of their interaction and the hierarchical structure. Question: When you were working as a messenger for your father in Sector 105, did you ever courier messages to other district subordinates to Sector 105? Yes, I did.
Question. Do you still remember what the message was about? I mean, the message you sent to each district. Response. I don't know. Question. The messages you carried to each district, where did you receive them from? Response. Sometimes I got from my father, or sometimes I got from the head of the offices. Question. Concerning decoding the telegrams. As a telegram decoder, from whom did you receive such telegrams for decoding? Response. I received them from the typists and the radio communicators. Council Samsakun, Mr. President, I have no further questions to put to this this witness. However, I would like to cede the floor to my colleague to continue putting a few more questions.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Président.
Good morning, Mr. President. Good morning, Your Honors, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, Mr. Witness. My name is Isabelle Durand. I am counsel for the civil parties, and I do have a few questions to put to you. Just now you stated that you accompanied your father. In May 1975, you two traveled to Phnom Penh to attend a General Assembly taking place in the Olympic Stadium. Can you please describe to us the state of the city of Phnom Penh in May 1975?
Response. I do not think I understand your question.
When you arrived in Phnom Penh in May 1975, in Phnom Penh with your father, what was the state or situation in which the city was found? Were there people moving about freely? Were there vehicles driving through the city? Did you find an empty city aside from the Olympic Stadium?
Response. The city was empty. It was very quiet. People did not dare walk about. There was no car, no motorcycles. There were only a few soldiers who were seen standing guard at some premises.
Et comment était la vie?
And what was the state the city of Phnom Penh was in when you were working as driver for Ms. Ying Terit in 1978?
Response. At that time, there were only workers at different ministries or offices and soldiers who occupied the whole Phnom Penh.
En votre qualité de...
In your capacity as driver, how did your typical workday unfold? Where did you sleep? Where did you take your meals? And how often did you drive Ms. Ying Terit?
Response. I was offered an accommodation at the outside, but when it comes to eating, we would be asked to eat communally, and I would then be asked to take Madam Ying Terit to, for example, the medicine production factory.
Est-ce que vous aviez la possibilité...
Were you able to discuss with other staff members from the Ministry of Social Affairs?
Response. At that time, I did not converse with any of the workers because as a driver, my duty was to drive a car.
And why were you unable to discuss with the others?
Response. I don't understand your question for sure. Discussion. Are you referring to just brief conversation with our colleagues? If so, we could do that. For example, I could chat with colleagues, but not about other functions.
Et sur quel sujet porte...
And what did you talk about? What kind of topics did you cover during those conversations?
Response. We would ask one another about our well-being, where they lived. It's more about greeting.
Est-ce que vous...
Were you able to avail yourself of the possibility to exchange your views on what was happening in Phnom Penh at the time?
Response. I'm afraid not. At that time, no one would dare talk anything about this. We were very afraid. We had to mind our own business. We were afraid of being accused of being an enemy, and people did not wish to risk their life talking about politics at all.
Vous avez déclaré...
You stated that you accompanied Ms. Ying Terit to various locations, and you also took her to a pharmaceutical institute. Who was there exactly? Were there very many people? Were there students?
Response. At the medical school, she would be attending sessions where new staff member attended the sessions as well.
il n'y avait que du...
Were there only staff members from the Social Affairs Minister working at the medical school, or were there any other people?
មានតែបុគ្គលិកពេទ្យ
Response: There were only the medical staff member at the social affairs section.
Pouvez-vous nous dire comment...
Can you please tell us how communications were exchanged within and without the Social Affairs Ministry?
ខ្ញុំអត់បាន
Response: I don't know things about this because I was a driver driving the vehicle, and it was not in my capacity to know about this communication channel.
Savez-vous s'il existe...
Do you know if there was a telegram section operating within the Social Affairs Ministry?
អត់មាន
Response: No.
Vous avez évoqué dans votre...
In E3 477, you described two types of meetings that were held within the Ministry of Social Affairs. You talked about quarterly assemblies, and you also talked about follow-up meetings. Sir, can you please tell the court whether these are indeed two different and distinct types of meetings?
Response: These two meetings were separate meetings, the normal meeting and the self-criticism meetings.
Que se passait-il au cours des réunions...
Inaudible for the interpreter.
The President Council, activate your mic, please.
Que se passe...
Pardon me. What happened during the meetings that you described as routine and usual meetings?
អត់មានអីទេមាន
Response: Nothing happened except that the people would criticize one another.
Et que se passait-il au...
And what would happen during those self-criticism meetings?
Response: In these meetings, people have to place themselves for being criticized. Allow yourselves to be criticized by others in the meeting.
Des décisions étaient-elles...
Were decisions taken at the conclusion of those meetings?
Response: After the meetings, each person who was criticized or whose mistakes or weaknesses were found in the meeting would then be asked to commit not to do that again.
C'était la seule décision qui était prise?
Was that the sole decision that was made?
Response: Yes, it is correct.
Les personnes qui étaient envoyées...
And of those who were sent to K7, after what type of meeting were they transferred to K7.
Response. There was no other meetings.
En votre qualité de chauffeur,
In the course of your duties as a driver to Miss Ying Terit, you drove her to hospitals. Can you please tell us who was being cared for in those hospitals? Were there soldiers? Were there officers? Were there civilians? And were there many patients who were being cared for in the hospitals?
Response. At that time, both civilian and soldiers were treated at the hospital, but the majority of the inpatients were soldiers who brought from the battlefields from the border really occupied the whole hospital vicinity.
en ce qui concerne le personnel,
As far as the medical and technical staff are concerned, they were working in the hospitals. Can you please say a few words with respect to the nationality of the staff and whether or not there were many staff members working in the hospitals?
Response. The medical staff were of Khmer nationalities mainly. There were some experts as well who were Chinese.
vous avez relaté une
You provided us an account during which Yang Tarit had been criticized about the disappearance of staff members from the hospitals. Can you please describe to us, once again, that particular scene?
Response. How would you expect me to describe all about this? Can you please be more precise?
C'était à
The occurrence was at the Khmer Soviet Friendship Hospital. You noticed Ms. Yang Tarit being criticized over the disappearance of technical staff. You had provided this account in your written record of witness interview.
Response. At that time, she met with Chinese comrades, but at that time there were not enough medical staffs, and she was criticized over the disappearance or the shortcoming of the medical staff member, and I heard them exchange the conversation, but I did not hear the detail of the conversation, although I knew that they were talking briefly about the disappearance of the medical staff. They didn't appear during the time when the Chinese experts were there.
quelle décision
What decision did Yang Tarit take in order to replace the staff members who had disappeared?
The President, Mr. Witness, please hold on. Counsel for Mr. Ieng Sari, you may now proceed. Counsel Ang Odam. Thank you, Mr. President, and Your Honors. Again, I take issue with this line of questioning. It is irrelevant because Madam Ing Teret has been severed from this case file already, and I think it is a waste of time to dwell on the matter that is not relevant.
Oui, Monsieur le Président, mes questions.
Mr. President, my questions do not concern Ms. Yingtarit exclusively. They relate to the organization structures in place in the hospitals during the time that she was responsible for hospitals in her capacity as Minister of Social Affairs.
The President, the objection by counsel for Mr. Ieng Seri is sustained. Witness is now instructed not to respond to the question that just put by counsel for the civil parties.
Je vais revenir un peu en arrière, Monsieur le témoin.
We'll just move back to a few previous subjects, Mr. Witness. You stated that you learned to read and write in Ratanakiri. You specified that at B20, all of the children of cadres had been sent to that area, all of the children of cadres who were at the ranking of chief. You were in Ratanakiri. Can you please tell us if the other children had received an education?
Response. There were quite a number of children who had this opportunity.
Il ne s'agissait pas d'enfants de cadres.
Were they not the children of cadres?
Response. No, not really. This place was meant to provide education only to the children of the cadres. Only.
Et les enfants des personnes qui n'étaient pas.
And what about the children of those who were not cadres? What kind of education did they receive?
Response. During that time, there was no proper school. People would only go to an office in the jungle, and the office would be used as school. The children of ordinary villagers would never be offered such opportunity, because the children of the cadres would only be offered some specific education to understand, to count numbers and certain characters.
Vous avez indiqué.
You testified that there were cooperatives. However, you did not talk about work camps. Were there any work camps at K-17?
Response. I do not understand what you mean by saying work camp. I would like you to rephrase your question.
Est-ce que pour vous.
To your mind, are cooperatives synonymous with work camps? Do you refer to the same thing when you talk about cooperatives? Is a cooperative a work camp?
Response. A cooperative is more or less a communal eating hall. And when it comes to working, people also worked collectively because there was no private farmland or property. So, for example, in each single village, there would be a communal eating hall where people would come and eat communally, and then they would really do farming collectively, not individually.
Les enfants dans.
And were the children who were living in the cooperatives receiving education?
Response. There was no such education provided to any of the children.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Témoin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Witness. I have no further questions, Mr. President.
The President, fellow judges of the bench, would you wish to put some questions to the witness? Judge Lavigne, you may now proceed.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. Witness, I'm Judge Laverne. You have already taken an awful lot of questions since yesterday, and I just want to follow up on one or two matters. First, about the date when your father died. Could you give us some rather more precise information about that particular date?
Response. My father died on the dates that I don't exactly remember, but I know for sure that at that time he was convened to come to Phnom Penh through a helicopter along with his 2 bodyguards, I myself, my uncle as well. By the time we arrived at the Pochontong location, we were picked up by a vehicle, and he and his 2 bodyguards came to K17, and I was allowed to tour the city because we came from the province, and that's all I know about what happened. And after he had disappeared to work in the late afternoon after touring the city, I did come to the riverfront to visit the royal palace, and by the time I came home, he already died at the house. I reported to K17 about his death, and some people were assigned immediately to take care of the body of my father. Later on, there was no proper information other than that he was killed by an enemy. But at that time, I saw a handgun, the handgun that my uncle was holding, and a metal bar, and that's the scene of the incident, and the body of my father was later on taken to K17, and that's all I remember.
When you talk about your uncle, are you talking about Khamphun?
Response: yes.
Et la version.
And the version of your uncle's and father's death that seems to me that seems to you to be the most plausible one is what? It was the settlement of a dispute or some kind of intervention from outside?
Excuse me, Judge Laverne, I would like to object to that question. It is our position, is the Nuncia team's position, that this witness is here to testify about administrative and communication structures. We certainly accept that the date, the alleged date, when an individual may or may not have been called to Phnom Penh or to any place is relevant. In fact, I would have asked that same question myself, when. However, the details of what I believe you're about to go into are irrelevant to case 002/1. You are now moving into an area that has little to do with administrative and communication structures. I believe, and you will correct me if I'm wrong, that you're about to discuss a particular alleged killing that does not form the basis of this particular trial. So again, let me just make that very clear. I did not object to the first question you asked because, as I said, I indeed was going to ask that myself. I myself am very curious as to when exactly that alleged message was sent. However, again, just to reiterate, everything after that, I believe, is irrelevant to this trial. Thank you.
The President, the objection and the ground for objection by the Defense Counsel for Mr. Nunjir is not well founded and does not sustain. Witness is now instructed to respond to the question. Otherwise, I would like to ask the judge to repeat the question. Witness, could you please repeat your last question, Your Honor?
Oui, Monsieur le témoin,
Yes, Mr. Witness. I was asking you if, on the basis of your own knowledge, there is a particular version of events that seems to you to be more plausible than others with respect to the deaths of your father and uncle. Are we talking about a dispute between the two of them which came to a sorry end, or would you say that there are other reasons behind this?
Your Honor, I actually do not understand this myself. If we would think that they had any contradiction or argument, I do not believe that it was the case, because they were siblings and they were quite close to one another, and in addition they did not possess any guns or weapons at all. When they came here, they had left behind their belongings, including guns or weapons as well, and then they were also searched before they were taken away. So I believe that it was not because of the contradiction or argument between them. At that time, there was no investigation whatsoever to find out the cause of their death. Normally, if people died, they would assume that people have died because they had been fighting with the enemy or so.
But was there an official version of these events? And if so, were your father and your uncle Kamfun treated in the same manner? It seems that honours were done to your father and that he was cremated and that his ashes were returned to his home. Was the same treatment meted out for your uncle?
At that era, I did not understand well. I did not attend the funeral either. Following that days, I stayed for a short period of time with Madame Ing Thirit at Araksat.
If you can't tell us precisely what the date was, do you have a general idea of the time when these events occurred? What year was it in? Was it at the beginning of the year? Was it towards the end?
I do not recall the date exactly when the event took place. If I want to find out about it, then I would have to go and ask my relatives or friends. They might have known the event.
do you know if, when these facts occurred, there were other people who were victims of purges? Were there other people who were called to training sessions in Phnom Penh? Were there other cases of disappearances? And if there were, can you quote any names?
Following the death of my father,
Is that working now? I was saying I would like to object to that question for the record, and I apologize for interrupting your testimony, Mr. Witness. Again, purges, the particulars of alleged purges are not a part of this case. Those are not the crime bases that we're looking into. The crime bases in this case, the underlying crimes, are population transfers. So, of course, we can talk about telegrams and structures, everything that we have been talking about. But when we get into the details of alleged purges, I think, and I submit, and it's our team submission, that that is well outside of the scope of case 002/01, and I just wanted to put that on the record. I know it seems a bit strange to object to a question from a person who will decide on that objection, but I just want to make it for the record.
President, Prosecutor, you may proceed.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think it would be useful if the Chamber could take a position on the question of whether matters put by judges can be objected to by parties. That's the first thing. I don't think actually that is the case. Secondly, everybody heard the witness talking about invitations or convocations sent by Nunchev to certain cadres of Sector 105 who then disappeared. And it therefore seems to me that the question is relevant, but because it concerns purges where for certain individuals the issue was instructions sent out by the centre.
If I could just respond to that, I agree that the question of whether or not the topic, of alleged purges are contained in correspondence communication, that's obviously relevant. I can't object to that. However, what I'm objecting to is an exploration of the details of individual purges, which is, I believe, the route Judge Laverne was going down. As to whether or not I'm allowed to object, I certainly will continue to do that when I find the question objectionable. You're the judges. You will decide on the merits of whatever it is I have to say. Thank you.
The President. The objection is not founded, and the Chamber advises the parties that they not object against the question posed by members of the bench. Witness is instructed to respond to the question. Witness. I would like to clarify the death of my father. Of course, he died on his bed. And as for my uncle, he died at the door. And he had his gun in his hands. But when he left for the place, he did not carry any gun at all. That's why I was a bit doubtful of the cause of his death. President, the time is now appropriate for the morning adjournment. Soon the international side of the court will conduct a town hall meeting starting from 12 o'clock, and the Office of Administration has requested that this room be vacated for the purpose of the town hall meeting, and the hearing will resume this afternoon starting from 2 in the afternoon. And this afternoon we hearing the testimony of TCCP1 through a video link from France, and we will hand over the floor to the civil party first. Witness, your testimony this morning is done, and this afternoon we are not going to hear you. We will resume hearing you tomorrow morning. Court officer is instructed to facilitate the return of the witness and his duty counsel and have him back to the courtroom tomorrow morning for the resumption of the hearing. I know the defense counsel is on his feet. You may proceed, counsel.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've been informed by our client that he's not feeling well, and he would like to spend the afternoon session in the holding cell. He's suffering from a headache, lack of concentration, and back pain. So our application is that he be permitted to spend the afternoon in the holding cell. Thank you.
The Chamber notes the request by Mr. Nguyen Chia through his defense counsel, requesting that he be allowed to follow the proceeding remotely through audio-visual means for the remainders of today's proceedings due to his health reason. He cannot follow the proceeding directly in this courtroom. The Chamber grants the request. Mr. Nguyen Chia may follow the proceeding for the remainders of today's proceeding in the holding cell downstairs, where the audio-visual link is connected to him to follow the proceeding. And Mr. Nguyen Chia has waived his right not to be present directly in this courtroom. However, the Chamber requires the defense team for Mr. Nguyen Chia to submit immediately the waiver of Mr. Ieng Sari not to be present directly in this courtroom with his signature or thumbprint. And audio-visual staff are directed to link the proceeding to the holding cell downstairs, where Mr. Nguyen Chia is to follow the proceeding by remote means. security guards are instructed to bring Mr. Nguyen Chi and Mr. Kyu Sampon to the holding cell downstairs. This afternoon, Mr. Nguyen Chi is to remain in the holding cell where he will be connected through audio-visual link to the hearing in this room, and Mr. Kyu Sampon is to be brought to this courtroom before 2 o'clock this afternoon.